at the end?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll just keep it at the end.
Okay, it's time, right? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Learn Our Religion. We're excited to have you here. Hi, John.
Yeah, you're in. Yeah, there you are.
He keeps changing this. Anyway, we're really excited to have you come. And so I'm just going to give I'm Diane Summers, and I'm just going to give you a couple of things, and then we'll proceed. Next week is a third lecture on that series about Turkey for the.
Really good too.
It has, and yeah,
Excellent.
they are excellent. And she's, okay, John.
Yeah, you're good. Good. You're good.
Okay. John and I have known each other for what, 60 some years. And I was 2. And anyway, and we really have known each other for at least for 16 years. 60 years. Maybe I was 1. Okay. So anyway, next week will be the third lecture on the Turkey, and it's Christine, what is it? Christine Fredrickson, and she's talking on women in the ancient Mediterranean world. And these people from the Interpreter Foundation are just, some of them I haven't even met, but I know that they're an amazing group, all taking different subjects. So that's what next Monday is going to be. The following Monday after that, nothing. I'm out of town, so we're not doing anything. And the next week after that is Silver Linings, the inaugural for only single women. So John, some of you men, sorry, maybe someday we'll have, gray linings for men, but we have silver linings for women. And so that's going to be our inaugural. And we hope if you have single women friends that are struggling, or they just aren't struggling anymore and they want to share why they aren't, life is good, and we'll have that. So get a copy of it. We're glad you're here. We welcome all the people out there from on YouTube. There are always more people out there than there are here. So it works out all the way around. We're just glad you're here. So our opening prayer tonight will be given by Darylyn. Am I saying that right, Darylyn? Daryl Lee. Okay, sorry. Glasses. I'll blame the glasses. Daryl Lee Carlisle will give us our opening prayer, and our closing prayer will be given by Lynn Walker. And we'll turn the time over. We'll just proceed. Let me just say always my thank yous, John. 60 years and going strong, right?
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Hard to believe.
Hard to believe, but very true, right?
1 foot in the grave, the other on a banana peel.
Well, okay, but that's you. But
Yeah,
the silver lining
right.
people, we're in good shape. And Bonnie, of course, Bonnie is a saint, and Tom, our technician, we appreciate you very much. So thank you all for coming. So on that note, we will start, and next time we'll just get this aimed a little differently.
Okay, yeah, we can do it.
Okay, so let's start with our opening prayer, and then we'll turn the time over to Dr. John Lund. If you have any questions, or even if you can actually write them in the live chat thing, and we address them. If you have a question, maybe better towards the end, and then Tom runs around and gives you the microphone so the people out there can hear the question. Okay. And if not, you can repeat it.
Yeah, I'll try.
So thanks all for coming. We appreciate that. We're going to be slowing down for some of the summer, and yet we still have a few things left. So thank you, and thanks for supporting the program. Sister Carlisle, will you give us our opening prayer?
Our Father in heaven, we come before you this day with gratitude in our hearts for the blessings that we have, and we're grateful that we can meet today and be inspired by the things that will be talked about tonight. And we ask you to have a spirit.
Now tonight, I'm kind of always excited about some of these things, but this one is really interesting. I think we're gonna have a little fun and maybe be able to look at ourselves and laugh a little bit at the same time, because we're gonna be talking about what science tells us about some of the fundamental differences in men and women and how men and women communicate differently. All right, so that's one of the things we're going to be looking at here. And As soon as Tom gives me the okay. And so what I'm saying is I'm going to share with you kind of 3 secrets here, all right? 3 secrets that tell us, as I said, the science tells us about the difference between men and women. Now, the first thing I want to do is make a little bit of a disclaimer. If you look at that red line up there, that red line represents most men, and the gold line represents most women. But you'll notice there's some overlap. And so the statements that I'm going to be making about men and women are generally true, all right? And they apply to the majority of men and women. However, don't panic if you're an exception, because you probably fit in that little category there that overlaps. So don't worry about that. And I'll remind you that a couple of times as we're going along tonight. So just be aware of that. But men and women do communicate distinctively differently, all right? And what men and women, for example, in processing information, how you think, when I give, like I'm speaking right now to a group of people here in this audience and also out there in YouTube land, but just know that when what I'm saying is taking a different pathway through your brain if you're a woman than if you're a man. It takes a different pathway through the brain. Now, guess who said that? Dr. Luann Bresendine. Now, Dr. Bresendine is a scientist. She's a neurologist, deals primarily with the brain, and she graduated out of Yale, pretty respectable institution, taught at Harvard Medical School, fairly respectable, and is currently at UC Berkeley. She's also the author of the book called The Female Brain and The Male Brain, both of which are national bestsellers, and also another current book that's out there directed towards women and their thought processes and things like that. So we're going to be quoting a lot from Dr. Bresendine and also from another professor out of the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Reuben Gur. But just know that to begin with, we process information differently, all right? Now, that shouldn't be a big surprise, but this might surprise you a little bit more. And that is, of course, that one of the challenges that we face is understanding how those differences interact, how they change. And I think you're going to find this kind of fun to take a look at. So in general, men tend to go to the mall and kill it and bring it back home. All right? Whereas women in general tend to go to the mall and kind of shop and look around. So that wandering line that you see on the right-hand side up there, that's women wandering around the mall. And the other is men going and killing it and bringing it back home. All right, is that all right? Just take a look at that for a minute, okay? Here's a man and a woman. We're taking a look at their closets for a moment. And the woman's response, I've got nothing to wear. Again, the man, looking at one shirt he's putting on, says, well, that ought to do me for a week. A little difference between men and women and how some of the things. I like this one here too. This is the woman shopping there. She picks it up and goes, shampoo for dry and damaged hair. The men, shampoo 6-in-1 for hair, face, body, carpet, car, and dishes. So it tends to be kind of universal there, right? Just a little bit on that. Now, I want you to look down at the lower right-hand corner for a minute. All right, let me go over here. All right. Look at the lower right-hand corner there for a minute. That's the same man. That is the same man. All right. It may not look like it to you, but you look at him closely and you see it. It is. What I really want you to notice is his hairstyle. It hasn't changed in 60 years. He may be older, but that's the style his hair was when he was in high school. Most men wear the same style hair they did in high school. And if they had butch hair, then they wear a butch today. And if they was, whatever it was like, they tend to leave it that way. Now, we take a look at the 60s here for women and the Farrah Fawcett 70s look maybe. These are decades by decades, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000, 2010, 2020. Women changed their hairstyle. Now, the thing that's been a mystery in my family and in my life is that my hair is kind of receding a bit over the years, and also it's turned gray. But do you know my wife's hair hasn't changed color at all? And how is that possible? I just don't know. It's one of those little modern miracles, I guess. Well, we can see some of those things. And there's kind of a number of differences. Now, between how men and women communicate. But I'm going to, one of them is this: giving too much information or giving too little information. All right. Guess who's guilty of which? Because each one is guilty of one of those. All right. Let's just take a look at that for a minute. The typical male uses 3,000 to 7,000 words in a day. 3,000 to 7,000 words in a day. Wow. Okay. Typical female uses 7,000. That's the base. That's the higher limit for a man. Now, when you get into what I refer to as sadistics, which is statistics, I have a doctoral minor in it. I didn't want to, but I was kind of forced to through circumstances, but I've come to appreciate it. Anyway, you get, when we say normal, we're really talking about a bell curve, and we're talking about 66 and 2/3% of the population. That's what norm is. That's what normal means, all right? Then you've got a sixth on each side. And then out here, we call out standard deviations away from the center. And that what that means eventually is that you have these outliers. Like if I dropped a group of marbles on the floor, just a whole pile of marbles, most of them would be in about a 6-foot range. But then you'd find some had flowed way out there, all right? Those are what we call outliers. They're out there. They're out there. Well, men at the top level are 7,000 words a day. Women start at 7,000 words a day. Now, I don't know if it means they get up in the morning and say 7,000 words, but they start at 7,000 words a day and go up to 21,000 words a day. Do you think that has an implication? Let's think about that for a minute, all right? So when we look at men and women, their verbal differences, here you've got a man with a little wheelbarrow. It's not even full, by the way. It's a little tiny thing. And here's a woman with a wheelbarrow full of a lot of words, all right? And here's some other things. I just want to talk about this for a minute. Did you know that most women now have between 4 and 8 confidants? Women tend to include their children, sometimes their adult children, and other maybe significant family members in that circle of intimates with which they're willing to share their innermost feelings. 50% of all men have no one other than one person. That's often their wife. But there are some men that are reluctant to open up and share with their wives if they feel their wives are going to blab everything they say to all their people that they want in their circle of influence, so they won't open up if they feel like they can't trust their wives to say that. But 50% of all men have no more than one. It could be a fishing buddy, it could be a brother or a father or something, but 50% of all men have one. 40% of men, now we're covering 90% of all men, have 2. That means only 10% of men have more than 2 confidants in their life that they're willing to open up and share their soul with. Only 2. So, and women start with 4 and easily work up to 8 confidants that they can confide in, all right, to do that. It's a fundamental difference between men and women. It's really a major one, as a matter of fact. And I was talking to the second counselor in the Young Women's Association in the church, and I was explaining this to her, and she said, well, all I know is this, that a man needs a woman and a woman needs a man and other women she can talk to. Well, she was right. She's right, because most women have more words they want to share than what the man that maybe that's significant in their life has the ability to absorb. Have you seen these trucks that say gross weight on it? Have you seen it? Gross weight like 2,000 pounds or something, or gross weight this. That means it can't take more than that. Well, most men have maybe a 7,000 to 10,000 gross weight words that they can handle and process. And this is the other thing that is kind of fascinating about that. Men are into, let's take a look at a couple of male-dominated professions. To begin with, the tech field now is becoming more and more women are getting involved in it. But originally, the tech field was developed by men. And so the military also. These are 2 professions that were primarily dominated by men. And what do they do in those professions? They abbreviate. They abbreviate. MIA, AWOL, CO, XO, 10 clicks. Now, maybe you understand all those expressions, right? Commanding officer, executive officer, absent without leave, missing in action. But they speak an abbreviated language. That's because that's a male-dominated area. And the same was true with the tech field. I asked Tom some of the words that you use, but I think we're talking about let's see, HDMI, USB, CPU, Wi-Fi. You know what Wi-Fi stands for? I didn't know what Wi-Fi stood for till tonight. What does it stand for? Anybody know? It's
Wireless fidelity.
wireless fidelity. See, most of us didn't know, but that's an abbreviation. Well, you can multiply that out. Men tend to then want to focus on the content. They want to get the message. They want to get it in the shortest form possible. Now, so this is what part of the dilemma is that we look at. So let's move on here. Here's a conversation. So looking at the difference between the sheer volume of words used by men and women, okay, here are some of the general observations. Women generally give men too much collateral information. In other words, then often in wanting to express your opinion or your feelings, you give all these words, but guess what? Most men get lost in that maze of words. And they're not, when you're done, you think you have communicated clearly and distinctly, and any other woman would understand you. Maybe, all right? Generally, yes. Most men are going to kind of not get that. So if you can read that up here, here's what it says. It says, this is a woman now talking. She goes, I have a nice dress that I'd like to wear, and I feel trapped in the house. And we do not have to spend a lot of money, and our kids haven't seen their grandmother in a long time. And it seems like this might be a good time. And the man goes, what do you want? I'd like to go out to eat at a nice place. Well, she was building up a case for what she wanted. Are you following me on this? Women tend to do that. It's okay, by the way. I'm not saying it's bad. It's a difference that we need to understand. And I think as men, we could be more understanding of that, for example. All right. But as women, it's helpful if you're aware of that what you need to do to be the most effective communicator you can be is kind of know what it is that you want and be able to send that message out. And we'll have some other examples of that a little bit later on. But what she really wanted, she was building up this case for, rather than getting right to the point of what she wanted. And when the man was looking for, what is it you want? And we're going to get to something else here, which I think you'll find kind of interesting about the male and female brain in just a minute. But generally, men, okay, need to give women more information. So a man comes home and says, listen, we're going to have a party. It's a party. That's the information he gives. It's a party. Now, what's going on in the woman's brain? She's going, well, what kind of a party is it? Is it a Mexican party? Is it this? Is that fiesta? I mean, what am I going to wear? Am I going to dress? Is your boss's wife going to be there? What time is it going to be held? In other words, women need more information, right? And I think that's a legitimate position to be in. Men tend to just, it's a party. That's it, see? Now, let's take another look at that, how that kind of works out here a little bit. Men could do a better job, okay, of what we call tellback or paraphrasing what has been said so that the other person knows that they're understood. Now, here's another example. So the woman says, listen, I need a dozen eggs and some whole milk and some whole wheat bread. And the man's gone, got it. That's the man's response, got it. Now, he thinks he's got it in his head. But what does she think? I don't know if he's got it or not. I mean, how do I know? I don't know that he's got it. So I'm going to repeat it. I may repeat it 47 times to irritate him. No, what happens is, because see, that's poor communication on our part as men. We need to learn that feedback skill. We need to learn that tellback skill. And that tellback skill just really means that we can paraphrase. So it's here's for example, we need a dozen eggs, we need the whole milk, and we need the whole wheat bread. And the man says, dozen eggs, whole wheat, or whole milk, and whole wheat bread. Now, if he brings back something else, you can throw it at him, right? But the point being here, at least now you know, and by the way, men, now they know that at least they've been heard. And so that's why tellback is important. And you'll save yourself a lot of repetitive reminding if you learn to give tellback. I can tell you that, all right? So men can learn a feedback skill that will help improve communication with both men and especially with women. All right, that's true. Verbally summarizing, paraphrasing, capsulizing, if you will, the information that means that they know that you've heard what they have to say. Now, here's another example. So what you're telling me is that we have a dinner appointment tonight at 6 p.m. with my mother, and that we have to leave by 5 p.m. in order to be there on time. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's an interaction. Now we've actually communicated and had what we call an exchange of understanding. And that is effective communication. But saying got it, or yes, or giving so much information that a person's lost in the context. So I'm saying to all you ladies out there, you would be better communicators when you're communicating with men. And that, by the way, is little men or big men. It seems to work either way here. If you would be concise in what it is you really want, kind of let that be your target concept. This is what I really want. And then you can justify it all you want after that. But let them know, I'd really like to go to dinner tonight. That would mean a lot to me if we could do that. You know, we haven't been out in a long time. Now you can fill in the blanks for the rest of it. But now, okay, now I know what we're dealing with, and we can talk about all the reasons why or why not after that. But you might find that, lo and behold, the man might respond, say, sounds good to me, let's go. And you don't have to build a big case for it. You just find you can go exceptionally well with that. All right, that was secret number one, all right? Communication. Men don't tend to give enough information, and women tend to give too much information. Well, that was the first secret, all right? Now, here's another secret. Again, we'll go back to the fact that, again, most men and most women are going to fall in these categories, but don't worry if you're the exception. It'll be okay here. And that is that here we are again. If you were to look at the male brain and the female brain in a microscope, yes, the gray matter and the white matter is the same. It looks pretty much the same. But there are some very distinct differences in how it functions. Now we're talking about brain function. By the way, this is not coming from me. This is the research that I've done and bringing together here and sharing it with you. This is what the scientists are telling us, the differences between how men and women and how they function. And I've already quoted Dr. Brizendine, but there are others that I could bring to the fore here as we go along. But how the brain functions. Now notice that one circle here, kind of on the left-hand side above the male brain. And if you look at that, there's one word to describe how the male brain functions, and that word is compartmentalized. Men tend to put things in compartments, and they kind of close the door of that compartment. And so if a man's through with the day, he's coming home, he goes, put that away, it's in a compartment. Comes home, the wife says, how was the day today? Well, he takes a quick look at the compartment, it has a sign in front that says, fine. Fine. My day was fine. Fine day. Thanks for asking. Good day. Yeah, fine. Well, she probably really wants to talk. She really wants to maybe interact. Maybe she's been dealing with little children all day long and hasn't had a human being to deal with, right? A peer of sorts. So maybe she really wants something else other than just to find out fine, that the day was fine. But the male brain tends to compartmentalize. But look at the female brain. The female brain is highly integrated, and that's the word that they use to identify the functioning of the female brain. It is integration, constantly integrating information. Morning, noon, and night, you ladies are processing information, and that's going to lead us to something really quite amazing here. The male brain is a problem-solving brain. If you bring a problem to a man, I asked Tom this earlier today, I said, Tom, if I bring you a problem, what are you going to do? He said, I'm going to start giving you solutions. Instantly start giving solutions. That's the male brain. The male brain is designed to find solutions. That's the first thing it is, all right? So here's a woman, and let's say she doesn't want solutions, she wants understanding. And so she says, oh boy, have I had a hard day today. You know, I had this and this and this. The male brain goes, well, all right, let's start solving those problems. Click, 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 click. And he's offering all kinds of solutions and she doesn't necessarily want solutions. She wants understanding. Well, that's where we could be more effective. Say, you know what? I know you're trying to solve a problem, but right now I just need somebody to have a listening ear, and I need understanding. All right, that's what I need. All right. So I need understanding, and I just had an underpulling here, so that was all right. So understanding. Well, that's owning your expectation. Is if you want understanding, then you ask for it, but that's really good. But the female brain is not always looking for solutions. That's what I'm trying to say. And so that's where we want to take a look at that. Okay, let's take a look here. Here's some facts about the female brain I think you'll find interesting. The female brain is about 11% smaller than the male brain. Now, don't deduce or don't assume anything by that, because it's more efficient than the male brain. The female brain is somewhat smaller but more efficient. It's also denser. Now, don't take the word dense in the sense of not being bright or intelligent. It means it's more compacted than the male brain. And I'll explain that in just a minute. It collects unassociated neurons. If there's a neuron floating around in the brain, I'll show you a picture of a neuron in just a second. But if there's a neuron floating around, the female brain goes, you never know when a good neuron may come in handy. Kaboom. It gets packed away, bong, in the female brain. Interesting. Has more space associated with communications on both frontal lobes. So both the right and left frontal lobes on the female brain is capable of developing communication skills. It's pretty much generally on the left side of the male brain that we find the communications. If a man gets in a car wreck and destroys, gets his head hit there and destroys this frontal part of the lobe here, he may never speak again. The woman suffering exactly the same injury, the right side of the frontal lobe will take over and she'll learn to communicate again. Is that interesting? Some things there. However, that part of the male brain that it doesn't have as much focus on communication is focusing on spatial issues. Now, what's a spatial issue? How much distance is there to park that car between these two cars? A man can look at that in general and go, yeah, I've got enough room to park there. A woman may go, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Now, you may think this is sexist. It's reality. It's reality. If you want to think of spatial things, think of a ball. Think of any ball. A golf ball, a baseball, a basketball, a football. And those are all spatial issues. And what are men obviously involved in? Big time sports. Sports are, it's all about spatial. It's all about spatial. So there's a part of the male brain that's naturally attuned to spatial things. Okay? Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't women that are interested in sports and do well and things like that, but that's a part of the male brain that's a little bit different. Also, and I know that most of you are aware of this, women are multitaskers. Your brains, lady, can focus on talking, thinking, and listening all at the same time. That is a miracle. As a man, I don't think I understand it. I accept it, but I don't think I can understand it because it's not happening in my brain. I can talk, think, or listen, and what it's like, I think I can describe it this way. Imagine that I have a main focus, whatever that is, talking, thinking, or listening, main focus on one of those. Whichever one I'm focused on, the other two have dimmer switches, just like the lights you can turn down, they go dim. They don't go all the way out, they're dim. So if I'm on this dimmer switch here for a minute, and that means if I'm talking over here, and if I'm listening, I may not really be thinking. We jump between those rather fast in our brain, by the way. That is also true. But it means that I can be thinking and my wife can be talking to me and she sounds like my Swedish grandfather. You hold the head, the he, the who, you hold the head. That's what I'm hearing. I hear her voice and I hear this lady, and she's talking to me, and then sometimes she'll go, honey, and I go, oh, I'm switching gears. Listening. Yes. Haven't you been listening to me the last 5 minutes? Don't you know what I've been saying? Well, you may want to kind of paraphrase and catch me up. No, I was thinking. And if I'm thinking, I am not really listening as a male. I'm not. That doesn't mean I'm not hearing noises out there. I'm not focused on those noises. Are you following that a little bit? And yet you ladies could walk into a meeting, and 5 or 6 people are having a conversation, and you're going, and you can tune into all those. How in the world does that happen? See, that's why I say it's a hard thing to kind of relate. That's called multitasking. Men are monotaskers. They're not multitaskers, okay? To do it. Now, those are neurons. I kind of had them enlarged, but if you want to look, those are neurons. Now, the male brain tends to electrify them. In other words, they basically eliminate them. If there's a floating neuron out there and the male brain looks at it and goes, you're not doing anything, gets rid of it. And the female brain does what? It collects it. So the male brain is getting rid of these floating neurons. The female brain is collecting them. Interesting. Just one of the differences between how men and women are processing information. And again, this is really interesting to me. At night, 30% of the male brain is awake. 30%. But 70% of the male brain goes to sleep. The compartments, they're in compartments, all right? One's a snoring compartment, but that's all right. There they are. They're in those compartments. The female brain, let's look at that. At night, 90% of the female brain is awake all night long. Only 10% of the female brain goes to sleep. How in the world do you girls survive? How do you, ladies, without getting much more sleep to your brains than that, right? Your bodies, by the way, can absorb a certain amount of sleep and relaxation, but not your brain. Your brain is like that shark that just never stops swimming, pretty much, okay, through that whole thing. So that's really different. But I want you to look up there, those yellow lines. See, there's a couple of yellow. In the on the male brain over there, you see that kind of yellow square? Corpus callosum. That's what it's called. And all of us have it. It connects the left and the right side of the brain together. And if you look out over here on the female brain, it's 2/3 or more larger. And what Dr. Reuben Gur said out of the University of Pennsylvania, who studies this specifically, this is an area of his specific research, the corpus callosum, connecting the left and right side of the brain together, and in neurology in general. And he said, in the male brain, the corpus callosum is compared to a pathway in the woods. In the female brain, it's a 4-lane freeway. All right? You are sending signals back and forth across the left and right side of the brain, day and night, interacting all information. Now, see if this isn't true. See if this doesn't relate to your own personal experience. If you get into a discussion, even an argument or something, a man and a woman, women tend to bring up the entire history because their history is available to them instantly because they've already got it all interacted, whereas a male is compartmentalized. So you may be talking about an issue and the male brain goes, well, that's in that compartment. And you're talking about all these other things. I thought we're just talking about this issue right here, this one issue. And the female brain tends to want to bring all that other stuff up into that discussion. There is maybe, historical points of interest or whatever. And by the way, in any of this, I don't mean it to sound chauvinistic or to sound, I'm telling you, if you want to get upset with Lou Ann Brizendine, all right? A female neurologist, because she didn't want to discover this. She's the one that says, I didn't want to find this out. I kind of thought that men and women were alike, and if we just raised each other alike, why, we'd be more alike. And she said, but that's not what I found out. What I found out is that men and women are distinctly different. We process information differently. And that the more that we can understand that, then the better we're going to be. All around, the better off we'll be to be able to be better communicators, okay? All right, moving on. Again, given the exact information, and that male, and I mentioned this earlier, but giving that exact information, the male and female brains will take that information through different pathways in the brain. Now, I wanted to illustrate that in the compartmentalized brain of the male. Look how it goes through the kind of a channel. It goes from one compartment to another compartment. It literally goes from door to door through compartments. It can move fairly fast, but in the female brain, it is constantly integrating information. So that's that 4-lane freeway going back and forth on both sides of the brain. And you're constantly integrating information to do that. Now, listen, from a standpoint of just survival, it makes a lot of sense to me that as a man, it's good for me to be able to be focused and not necessarily multitasking. Because if I'm with a sword in hand defending my wife and country, you want me to be focused. You don't want me to be thinking about a bunch of other things. See, if I'm out there sword fighting like this, and I'm going, I wonder if my wife would like that couch moved from the front room down to the basement. See, those men aren't with us anymore. They're dead. They have been eliminated from our society. So the only ones that are left are monotaskers. I'm sure the other multitasking men were killed in wars. Well, so that makes me a good provider, by the way, and protector. But it doesn't necessarily make me a great husband. because I'm a monotasking person. And yet, if you understand I'm a monotasking person and I'm talking, thinking, or listening, and that is a woman, and you understand that, you might say, oh, just a second, I need to make sure I got his attention here. Honey, can I have your attention for a couple of minutes? Now I'm focused. All right, what is, now I'm listening. But to talk to me and assume that I'm listening, even if we're in the same room and there's only two of us, if I'm thinking, I'm not necessarily listening. Or is that okay with that? All right. So we're talking about, again, how this information gets integrated. I want to use this as an example. Now, this is a little complicated up here, so we'll just kind of walk through this slowly. Monotasking, focus on talking, thinking, or listening. Okay, that's one of the things. Compartmentalized male brain, you got that. And you can kind of see out here that the pathway in the woods, you've got all of that there. You got the 4-lane freeway for the women on that. And by the way, that's Dr. Reuben Gur out of the University of Pennsylvania again. And he's the one so we see this integration, we see this compartmentalization. Now, let's take a look at how that works in a relationship between a man and a woman. So here's a man and a woman, and they're going to get into an argument. Now, that argument is going to happen at 6 o'clock or 6:30. I think it says 6:30 there. So, or 6 o'clock argument. But at 6:30, that argument in the male brain believed that it was resolved. In the female brain, she agreed that it was resolved, but guess what keeps happening? It's not because she doesn't want to have it resolved. It's because it's going to be integrating now with all the other information in her head from past history. It's going to be integrating through that. So at 10 o'clock at night, the man, or 10:30, whatever, the man suggests that they might be intimate. And guess what the female brain is going to say? How can you think of that after what you said at 6 o'clock? And the male brain's going to say, I don't know, maybe it's a gift. Because if you look carefully, look at all the compartments you have to go through to get from that blue dot all the way up to the red dot. You got to go through a whole bunch of compartments to get there. You don't have to in the female brain. It's a direct connection. Boom, 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 right there, because that information's integrated to do it. So sometimes it takes a while for, if you were spooked in an alleyway and your adrenaline kicked in, it's going to take 15 to 20 minutes for that adrenaline to reabsorb in your brain. And so you'll kind of be high for 15 or 20 minutes because of that adrenaline. And I'm just saying, ladies, that's a reality. If you're in a conflicted situation there in some way or another, you're not just, even if you agree, you're going to find that it's going to take a little while for you because you're going to be integrating, and it's going to take a little while for that to happen. In fact, that we were working on some podcast, and I thought it was interesting because Tom told me, he said, now, you got to wait a minute here for this movie thing to connect. So you hit a button and then you got to wait for it to integrate and connect, and then it flashes on, and now you can move ahead. You can't just move ahead. Well, sometimes that's what we have to do in human relationships. We have to realize that we process information differently. Men and women are distinct. They really, truly are. We have different ways of processing information. And that's why I have a little bit of a hard time with people that want to identify as male or female when they necessarily are biologically one or the other. I think they still have to then deal with that male or female basic, inherent, fundamental biological reality of how the brain functions itself. All right. Are there exceptions? I'm sure there are. Sure, there are exceptions, but that's one of those things that's just really very, very interesting. All right. We're going to go to the third secret. Now, the third secret's not as much about communication and it's not as much male or female oriented as it has to do with what I want to talk about right now is the idea of introverts and extroverts. And you've maybe heard that expression before, and maybe you've identified yourself as an introvert or an extrovert. Well, let's just talk about that. Again, let's go back to the disclaimer. When I'm going to make this statement is generally true about most people. There'll be some exceptions. So let's allow for those exceptions to happen. All right. Now, this is one of those things. What do you think about? Now, Bonnie, I'm going to ask you to come up here and help me out with this one. And I'm going to move over a little bit, Tom. Maybe we can get us both on here for a second. Yes, please do. All right. All right.
Are we on?
Yeah, we're on right here. Okay, good. Now, why don't you go ahead and ask me the question?
what would you think about painting the upstairs bathroom this weekend?
All right, I'm going to stop again. Does she want my opinion on painting the upstairs bathroom? Ladies? She doesn't want my opinion. She wants to paint the upstairs bathroom. Why would she ask for my opinion when I don't have an opinion? But I'm going to form an opinion that I didn't have before she asked me, that I will now defend to the death. Are you following me on this? I don't have an opinion. She's asking. So I'm gonna formulate an opinion. You know what, hon? I've got 2 projects I got to get done before we get that bathroom painted upstairs.
Are you sure your mother's coming? Are you sure we shouldn't paint that upstairs bathroom?
Now we're going to have an argument about painting the upstairs bathroom. An argument we wouldn't have had she not asked for my opinion. She didn't want my opinion. So let's go back and replay that.
Okay. So what I probably should have said is, I would like to paint the upstairs bathroom this weekend. Could you give me 2 hours worth of time on Saturday?
Yes. Yes. Well, I don't have an opinion that I have to defend because I haven't formulated an opinion. She just asked if I could give 2 hours on Saturday to help paint the bathroom. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, we'll do it. And if it takes a little longer than 2 hours, well, we'll do it, whatever it takes.
Great.
All right? Great to do that. Can you see where we get into a trap? We set ourselves up for an answer we don't want. And then we try to argue the person out of the answer they gave that they wouldn't have had we not asked them the question to start with. Is that too crazy making for you? So I'm just saying that's where we want to go with that, okay? So
I know you're on number 3. I was going to go back to the women giving too much information.
Oh,
So when you're
yes,
done
please.
On questions, I can do that.
all right. Oh, well, no, you can do it now. It's right this way.
We did this just tonight, just today, is that Tom said, oh, I think they've switched I think they're giving the wrong lecture, advertising the wrong lecture tonight. It isn't on men and women difference. This is on grandparents and grandchildren being allies. And so then I said, well, way back in like February, we decided to change the thing. And I called Diane. I'm sure she must have told Maddie. And I was going through all this whole explanation when all they wanted to know was, no, the lectures got switched.
That's right. In other words, so you went into a massive explanation
Yes.
and justification,
Yes.
right, to defend the position that you had when the solution was
Small. I could
Small.
have just said, the lectures got switched.
yes.
They're okay, you're
That's
okay.
right. That's great.
Okay.
Okay. So it's still a challenge. Some of the male-female differences here. Okay, here we go. Let's get back to this one. Yeah, there we are. So I say, attention all women, okay? Don't ask a man his opinion unless you really want it. And this is why it's important for women to identify what they want from a man without collateral information. All right? To be able to do that. Now I'm into the introvert-extrovert thing. It's a lot. This I think is greatly misunderstood. What is it that defines an introvert and what is it that defines an extrovert? What is it? What is the fundamental thing that does it? And I'm going to give you an answer to that. It's whatever charges your battery. Now, you may be surprised at this. So we look up here, that's a charging battery at the top. It is how much alone time that you need to charge your battery. That's what defines you as an introvert or an extrovert. And guess who some of the very, very best socializers are? Introverts. Well, that doesn't fit. No, it fits perfectly well. See, because we assume that introverts, and yet some people that we might call them wallflowers, are really extroverts who don't have the confidence to exert themselves. And so, but they really want that social interaction. And what they can do is they can be in a room where there's a lot of social interaction going on, even if they're not totally participating themselves, and they can draw energy from that social interaction that charges their battery. All right? And yet introverts, if they get too much social interaction, need a certain amount of alone time to recharge their batteries. So it's not your skill in socializing that defines you as an introvert or an extrovert. It's how much alone time that you need to charge your batteries. And so I happen to be an introvert. I think I've got pretty good social skills, but I happen to be an introvert. Bonnie is an extrovert. And so, for example, last night of Mother's Day, you know, we had Mother's Day the day. And so the kids and things were there and they were all talking to themselves. And she was energized just by all the interaction going on. She participated, but she was also energized. Is that true? Is that a valid statement? Yeah. And so she was energized by all that. I get absorbed too much of that. And I go, you know what, I'm going to take a break. I'll come back and because the noise and all the interaction and everything pretty much gets overpowering. And I'm going, whoa. But I can usually handle an hour, hour and a half. But then I want to take a break and just kind of recharge my battery. And I do. I say, so guys, I'll be back in a few minutes. And I'll go up in my office and sit and think and read or do something for a minute and then come back down and interact with the people. And I'm fine. But that's because I need a certain amount of alone time to recharge that battery to go back into the fray to do it. Especially when you got 12 conversations going on at once. And yet that's just reinforcing and charging certain people's batteries, and other people, it kind of drains their battery. All right, they do that in a very personal way. That's one of the things. So just think. So here's an introvert, and I know that's that particular picture, but kind of social interaction drains the batteries of that introvert. All right, even if they're very good with their social interactions, and the others are equally true. Extroverts. Social interaction charges their batteries, okay? Even if they're not very good with social skills, and too much alone time drains them. So that's why, now so I'm thinking, as you look at your own lives and you look at your relationships with men and women, and by the way, ladies and sisters, this is also for your children. Little men are little men. They're still men, but they're little men. And I'll tell you that the more concise you can be with them, the more productive you're going to be as well. And one time in our communication series, we were talking about being able to identify your expectations and to give exits. You remember some of us talking about exits? Let me just review that with you for those who didn't have an opportunity to hear that. You will find that in your communications, the more exits you can give somebody, the more effective you're going to be with males in particular. So Bonnie, come on back up here. Let's just have you come back here. And I'd like you to tell me a story.
Now, which story?
About Robbie in the garden.
Oh, Robbie in the garden.
Yes.
Okay. So Robbie is a grandson, young, preteen, kind of about 13. And and I said, Robbie, could you help me in the garden today?
The male brain helped grandma in the garden today. 24 hours with grandma in the garden. What did she say? Can you help me in the garden today? Meow. And no exit. There's no exit. Now, he loves her grandma. Robbie loves grandma, but that isn't the issue. It's him working in the garden all day. So I said.
So he disappeared.
Yeah, he disappeared is what happened. And I found later playing video games. So I said, did grandma want you in the garden? Yeah, she wanted me out in the garden all day. And I said to Bonnie, I said, honey, did you want Robbie to ask him to work in the garden all day? You said,
Oh, no, maybe just half an hour. Help me for half an hour.
oh, and I said to her, why don't you try it again? Just try it again with Robbie for a half hour. Try it.
Okay. Robbie, could you help me in the garden today just for half an hour?
Sure, Grandma. He did. Went out, worked for half an hour, probably a little longer, and was happy to do it. He had an exit. And I related this story that I was consulting with a Fortune 500 company on communications. And one of the great problems they had, and I'll make this real short, was dealing with the CEO. And so here's all this management team, and one of their major problems was getting time with the CEO to deal with significant issues. And I said to him, did you give him or her an exit? Did you give the CEO an exit? Well, what do you mean? Well, did you go up and say, oh, listen, we've got a problem and I need to talk to you about? If you come up and approach that way, we have a problem I need to talk to you about. You know what that male brain, and by the way, we found out that female CEOs develop this trait. Men have it inherently. Women have to develop it. And that is if somebody comes with a problem, to say, for example, okay, we got a problem we got to talk about. The male brain will go, we got a problem, schedule a time for it to do. But what if those problems could be answered within a minute or 5 minutes, or it could be, it's a short, I just need direction, I need this or I need that. What if it could happen that way? Well, so I said to this middle management kind of a group here and upper management. I said, I want you to give your CEO an exit, a time frame exit. So I said, how many of you have a problem that could be solved in a minute or less, honestly? And about 14 hands went up. So I picked out this one gentleman. I said, come here, you're coming here. You're my victim. I guarantee you won't be fired. But the executive, it was an oil company. Two oil companies had merged and they brought their management teams together. And I was teaching him on communications about how we could have a common language. Anyway, and I said, the CEO, he told me, he said, I excused myself from the meeting. He said, I'm buying 50 stations. So he's buying 50 gas stations. He's out in the hallway doing that. And so he excused himself in that meeting. And so I said to him, okay, how many have a solved problem that could be solved in, a minute or less? And this is my raised hands. I said, I want you to go out there. He's in the hallway. I want you to go and just stand by him. Don't say anything, just stand by him. And he'll pause and you go, what do you want? And you say this, I've got a problem you can solve in less than 30 seconds. That's what I want you to say to him. And he came back and he goes, he answered me. Like this big mystery. He answered me. Yeah, you gave him an exit, especially in the male brain. You gave him an exit. So what did Bonnie do when she said, can you give me 2 hours on Saturday to paint the bathroom? She gave me an exit. There's a time, an entrance and an exit.
But you have to stick to that.
Well, that's true. But generally, I mean, if you ran over a little bit, no big deal. But if it was an all-day project, then somehow you're not going to have credibility next time you ask.
Right.
Okay, because I'm going to, yeah, right. I remember our last little 2-hour project, that took all day.
I have a lot of women come up to me after that example and say, how you can't get the bathroom done in 2 hours. And so you need him all day. What do you do? And I said, well, be glad with the 2 hours worth of time. And maybe you'll have to trade with a friend or hire somebody or get children or
Right,
somebody to help you or something with the
but-
project.
But I do believe that most men would be willing to respond and say, it's going to take more time than this, and I'll just come back and finish it on another time or something.
Yeah.
I think,
Or if I
something
say
like
to
that.
John, I just need 2 minutes of your time, then usually it's done.
Oh, yeah, right. And I love to respond to that. I mean, and by the way, these are not things we develop between the two of us. These are things we learned and then tried to apply them in our relationship. And they've been super helpful to be able to do that. So the more she can identify a specific task and ask me about it and identify the task, and I can then respond to it, and generally with an exit, she's about 99.9% successful in getting what she wants out of that.
Also,
But ask me my opinion and then try to argue me out of my opinion
no,
that I didn't
doesn't
have
work.
before you asked me. That's a mistake.
Also, I know you have counseled some people who, like the woman said, my husband spends all night with the TV or on games or whatever, and it really makes me mad. And you've counseled
Yeah, I
her
have.
to say, ask him for what you want, for how much time you want then. So every night, I'd like 2 hours, or I'd like 1 hour or something.
Or,
And
yeah,
so he
or
has
I'd
an
like to be
exit.
able to talk for 15 minutes before we go to bed, just to be able to talk.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
And that may mean the woman talking and the man listening, but that's still, kind of the process that if they do that. Well, my hope is that tonight we've been talking about men and women differences in terms of communication and brain function at the same time. And I just want to assure you, I'm not making any of this up at all. You can go, and I challenge you to go and read some of this material yourself, and you're going to find that, like Dr. Brizendine and others that have that are doing the research on this. This is the latest research. This is up to date. This is I'd say this is 2023 research that we're talking about these, how the brain functions, and we're finding out more and more all the time about the brain function and what we can do and not do, and how men and women are a little bit different from each other and how they're sending and receiving messages and how they're communicating. But we can fight that and pretend that it doesn't exist, or we can learn how to interact with each other. And that's why I say, just if you ladies in particular could be more concise, and men, if we could be better at giving tell back and give women more information about what it is that we would like to do, or what the activity is, or just give them tell back on when they give us information that we can feed it back to them. As men, we'll be better communicators, and as ladies, we'll be better communicators as well. I leave those thoughts with you tonight. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. All right? So questions. I don't know if you've got any questions you want to ask me, but let's go ahead and see if there's any questions that anybody might have. Yes, please. Good question. I will start over here. You got the microphone?
Sorry, I have to let the internet, no.
All right.
We just want to make sure they can hear the question.
All right. Here's the question.
The first question is simple. The neurons that the women are collecting are bits of information? Okay.
Yes.
And then how can a woman turn off that some of that 90% of her brain that is integrating so she can get better sleep?
Yes. Oh, I don't know if you, the research seems to indicate that no matter what, you're still going to be, and they can do what's called now an fMRI. Now, an fMRI is able to do a brain scan, and it tells what part, it's an electronic analysis of the brain. And what it does, it can tell which parts of the brain are firing off at certain times by the electrical impulses that are going on. And the same parts of the brain that are functioning when you're dealing with relationships are going on all night long. So what are you ladies doing? You're thinking about relationships all night long. And remember, 70% of the male brain is gone. It's out of there. 30% of it. And I guarantee you it's probably not thinking about relationships. All right. There may be some on that, but it's going to be involved in different kind of things, probably, some problem solving things generally, just in the brain playing a role through the whole thing. So I think that the latest research would say you're going to still be processing information all night long, but that doesn't mean your body can't rest. It means your brain is very much alive and well, is what it means. So the body can find a certain amount of rest, but the brain is active, all 90% is functioning. Yes. Another question over here.
Well, I like that first slide where it says women's brains function differently than men. So men's way of thinking is the standard that it's measured against.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So two questions about application.
Okay.
So let's suppose that now I want to be the best dad I can be.
Okay.
So now I'm going to be talking to my son, or talking to my daughter, or talking to a grandson and a granddaughter.
Okay.
So how would I communicate differently when I'm talking to my son and my daughter? And then the other part of that question is, let's suppose I'm teaching a gospel doctrine class.
Okay.
And I have men and women in the class. And so how then, as I'm teaching, would I then, for my teaching, to make sure that as I'm teaching the men in the class,
As well as the women.
as well as the women,
Yeah.
how would I?
That's a great question. No, okay. So the question is whether you have, if you're addressing a male, a female, whether it's a teenage grandson or granddaughter, or whether it's in a gospel doctrine class you're teaching men and women. And I think you might want to try to draw upon examples for both. In other words, there are things that you could say where you could be very concise, and then there are things that you can elaborate on with stories and other things that would deal more with the women's filling in a lot of additional information. See what I'm trying to say? I think you could cut to the quick with a lot of the men in a priesthood lesson, for example, and they would all get it in a priesthood class situation. But if you're teaching a gospel doctrine situation with sisters in there, you're going to have to I think you'd have to take a different approach. I think your approach would have to be more inclusive and try to tell more stories. And generally, would it be fair to say, I asked a man who was a very, very famous teacher out at BYU, and this man was very, very, very exceptional, but he tended to appeal to emotion. And I asked him, I said, Lynn, I noticed that a lot of your presentations, you appeal to emotion. And he said, that is for the ladies. I do that. He says, it's a conscious effort on my part to try to communicate with them because they are also very feeling centered and oriented. And I have found that emotion sticks the story I tell to the men to the soul of the women. His name was Lynn McKinley. And some of you remember Lynn McKinley. Dr. Lynn McKinley one of the great teachers. Okay, and you younger generation aren't going to, but those of us that are over 180 know. All right. So anyway, and I've always remembered that. And so that it was some of those, now, not to be phony or fake, but genuine, sincere stories that you hear in general conference. Sometimes you'll hear a story and that story will stick to your soul. All right. And it doesn't mean it can't stick to men's souls as well, that they can't appreciate and value that. But generally you'll find that there'll be that not all the men are going to be necessarily weeping, right? And yet it's touching the heartstrings of many of the sisters, and they are emotionally moved by that. So I guess I think the most important thing is to be sincere. I think manipulation or being phony or something, that doesn't work. I wouldn't recommend that under any conditions. But I think that in teaching a class sometimes that you can appeal to stories and things that might then be able to relate in addition to giving factual information. Because we can go through, some of the greatest stories, I think, in the Book of Mormon are the ones that deal with Alma the Younger's conversion, different kind of things where people really have a change in their life. I mean, there's really some exciting things about that. But those are great questions, folks. All right, yes, please.
How does he deal with a grandson or granddaughter?
Well, I'm saying I would with a son. Okay, we're talking about a grandson or a granddaughter, the way I would deal differently with them, and I do deal differently with them. I've got 23 grandsons and granddaughters, okay, to combine. And so when I'm talking to my granddaughters, I talk to them differently than I do. When I talk to the boys, I give them very concise information, very concise information. And with the granddaughters, I chat. I chat and I visit. I'm willing to, knowing that that's much more their universe that they're comfortable dealing with. So if you watched me in the interaction and knew that that's what I was doing, you'd pick it up right away. But I'm not sure they pick it up right away.
So you would separate the boys and the girls?
No, not necessarily. Well, yesterday at Mother's Day, for example, I dealt with some of the boys. I talked to them individually as the general group was kind of visiting stuff. I talked to them individually, but I talked to them in very concise language. And my questions are very concise with them about that. They certainly weren't feeling level questions that I was asking them. And yet, how are you feeling about how things are going? Angela's just started teaching and she just got her teaching certificate. And so I can ask her how she's feeling about her new assignment teaching. Well, she can talk about her feelings real easily. Boys don't really start talking about their feelings, just in general. I'm just saying, I think you can be more effective in your communication if you're dealing with men and women and you make a distinction. And if you're talking, well, if you think of it maybe like a little bit of a foreign language, well, what if you thought of it that way? If I'm dealing here with a woman, she speaks a different language. I'm dealing with a man, he speaks a different language. One speaking German, one speaking Spanish. Maybe so. If I'm going to be trying to talk to everybody in one language, I better be pretty inclusive if I'm going to try to do that. But I think you can speak those two languages. I think that's very possible to do that. But it's helpful from my point of view to be able to do that. And I found it be very effective. And that my response is much more of a positive response. And that's the same true with my sons and daughters. We have 4 sons, 4 daughters. And I deal with them that same way. I pretty concise with the boys, but a lot more feeling and a lot more informational with the daughters. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but just give it. Yes, please, go ahead, expand on that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I'll give it to you. Mine is a two-parter. Mine is an observation and then a question.
Okay, go with your observation.
So you, Bonnie, and I have traveled together for 25 years.
Wow.
And what a trip.
Yes.
And it's funny because over all those years, Bonnie takes a quieter role. John, you've always just been so dazzling fun and yet you always hit it on the mark. Over the years, I watched so many times on the ships.
Yes.
People would act like after your talks, they'd laughed and learned and they just had such a great time. It's like, okay, after dinner, they would ask you, let's all go out and we'll go to one of the big shows and then we can maybe go dancing and I know you and so.
And I'm gone.
I know you and we knew that you would sneak out and you would go to the cabin and then you would notice that they just got Bonnie and I. And Bonnie's just having a great.
And I'm reading the Book of Mormon, so, you know, I'm happy to read the Book of Mormon or something.
Yeah, and yet they would be surprised because they say, well, where's John? You know, because, you know, this would be so fun, where's John? I say, well, he's probably in the cabin, he's reading or working on a lesson or something. And you have Bonnie and I are there, we're ready to do karaoke.
They're party animals.
And
I want you to know that,
yes,
yeah.
but- So my question is, so I've always found it interesting when you define extrovert and introvert, because I do think most people see it completely
Yeah,
opposite.
right.
You're outgoing, you're an extrovert, you're quiet, you're not what charges you
Right.
up. Okay, so after doing that for 25 years, I find I value a lot of quiet time in my life that I never got. No offense on our singing and our, you know, it's my party, we have some good times. So do you think sometimes with your life changing, becoming now a single person?
Well,
being an older
well,
person,
okay, in your case, Diane, I think that you felt a great responsibility for people and you wanted to make sure that their needs were met. And so you exerted yourself in that area to be more social when you may have preferred to have a little more private time.
And I'm enjoying that now.
Yes.
And it's funny because I think I enjoyed that then. We didn't care if John was in the cabin. We didn't. Okay, so I just wondered if your lifestyle or.
Yeah, it changes a little bit. Yeah, well, certainly our lifestyle affects that because if I'm getting a lot of social interaction and stuff, or and I enjoy a certain amount of social interaction. It's not like I opposed that at all. I enjoy that, but I get to a saturation point. You know, that's the reality. But not just me. This is different people, different places. Okay, we're still answering questions here, folks. So
Shouldn't be so interesting.
I'm intrigued with your statement about entrance and exit strategies. This may not necessarily apply to men versus women, but in a business relationship, and we're in a situation where we're at loggerheads with a developer that wants to come in the neighborhood, build a multi-story apartment complex, change the zone, blah, blah, blah. We've met with them, tried to compromise. Should we hire a mediator? How should we have an entrance strategy and an exit strategy where?
yeah, I think you actually answered your question. I think when you get to loggerheads, and that's a word you use there, then I think mediation is a very appropriate thing because a true mediator is called a third party neutral, meaning he comes into that situation and his is not like I'm on your side and I'm on your side. He's on what can we do to compromise and find some kind of happy medium here. And it may wind up that you have townhouses and not an apartment complex. I mean, there's a way to maybe, but I would say, yeah, otherwise, because if it's a win or lose battle, which oftentimes it does come to that, you know, do I win the zoning thing and do I win this, do I do that? And it becomes kind of an antagonism of sorts. And it sometimes it doesn't always have a pleasant ending to it. But I think that mediation is a great, a third party neutral is an answer sometimes to those situations that you just presented. All right. So is that a reality you're dealing with now? Is that one of those? Oh boy, that's a challenge.
No, Provo.
Oh, in Provo. Okay. Yeah.
Long story.
Yes, that's all right. That's okay. But that's and that's the legitimate issue. There are some things that don't get resolved. There are issues that cannot be resolved. They just can't. It's either got to be a win-lose situation. But I think that mediation provides the greatest opportunity for a compromise. That's been my experience. I've been a mediator. I've been a third party, 19 years in Utah. 19 years. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good questions. Okay. A couple more questions. Listen, happy to do it, guys. Over here too. Go ahead. You can take that question. We'll take your question and we'll take her question. Okay.
Well, I just want to come back to, talking.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's get back to that.
I want to make sure I kind of have this. So, like when I'm talking to my sons, a bottom line way would be like, hey, how's school? Or what do you think about the team this year?
Okay. Now, what do you want? Do you really want feedback See, because I think it has to be with what do you want? Because you're going to get a one word answer generally. See, how's school going? Fine.
Well, I have teenage boys, and that's about, if you got three, what were your best three today?
Yeah, right.
That's kind of how
Yeah,
they
right,
communicate,
exactly, yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to think that, like, for a daughter or a granddaughter or grandnieces.
Right.
It would be like, hey, how do you feel like what's going on over with your friends?
Yeah, you asked the right question. How do you feel? Because feeling is a great question that offers opportunity to explore all the collateral information.
How do you feel about your classes?
Yes.
How do you feel? Are you worried about the test?
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly.
How can I help you?
Right.
So
Those are all, everything you just said is a good way, I think, to approach most granddaughters or ladies in general. I think you'd find that you'll have a more positive response than if you just want concise information. I'm saying that's why learning to understand each other, the idea of the golden rule, treat others like you want to treat you, doesn't work in male-female relationships. See what I'm saying? We want to treat others like they want to be treated, maybe, not like we want to treat them or have them treat us. If that makes sense to you at all. Let's go to the question over here. Right there. Yes, please.
I had a question on your scenario with Bonnie.
All right.
Painting the room. So she says to you, I want the bathroom painted, well, you could need 2 hours on Saturday. What if you don't want the bathroom painted?
Oh, you mean, well, let's say you're talking to a man and he wants the bathroom painted and you don't, or just,
The opposite. What if I asked you and you really don't want to?
Yeah, so she
Oh.
Don't want that.
yeah. See, but I'm saying the mistake is asking me for my opinion when she doesn't want it.
But what happens if?
But if she said, well, what do you think about painting the bathroom? I go, I don't want to paint the bathroom. But see, that wouldn't be an issue if she didn't ask me my opinion. So what?
Saying, what if you really didn't want to paint the
What if you did have an opinion?
That I don't want the bathroom painted. You mean, okay, then if she says, could you give me 2 hours on Saturday to help paint the bathroom? I go, I don't want to paint the bathroom. Now you have to negotiate because you're in a relationship of equals. And negotiation means I really do want to paint that bathroom. So what can I give you to make it worthwhile for you to let me paint that bathroom? That's what you may have to do is negotiate, because the truth is marriage is a relationship of equals. So it requires a certain amount of give and take and things like if Bonnie would say, oh, what can I do for you to make it meaningful enough that you'd be willing to go to this play with me? Especially a play that she's seen 40 times and I've seen 3 times. All right? Les Miserables. Okay, it's all right, but I don't think I need to see it again. Or what's the other one? Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat, or there's 3 or 4 of them that I'll say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll trade you a football game for a play. You come to a football game with me, I go to a play with you. All right, see what I'm saying? Negotiate. I promise you it will work. You can negotiate because the threshold of his not wanting to paint that bathroom may not be greater than some other different kinds of activities that he'd be willing to participate in. Trust me on this one. Yes, it'll work. All right, think about it. All right.
Diane says, remember, you've got to do it with a good attitude.
Well, yes. Now, if I go to this play, I need to go with a good attitude, not like, well, I hope you're happy. I went to the play with you, I hope you're happy. You got your way. That, you go with a good attitude. Go and enjoy it the best you can. A smile on your face. And then she goes to the football game and eats popcorn and may not particularly enjoy it, but not notice what's going on. But it's okay. I like her companionship. And she wants my companionship. I'll be there. I'll be a good companion. Is that fair? Question. Say, Tom?
Yes, Tom.
All right.
On the good attitude part, and I
Yeah.
approached this by the other day, I kind of think Layton and Lemuel get a bit of a bad rap. I mean, they deserve almost everything.
Yes.
But they walked every step Nephi did. They walked every step that, everybody did. They went back and got plates. They went back and got wives. they were actually eventually obedient. They just murmured about it every one of those steps.
Right.
And it poisoned the.
But they were
attitudes-
obedient with murmuring.
Exactly, and it poisoned the attitudes of their posterity.
Yeah, it did.
So that they saw everything in a whole different
Yeah.
frame that became animosity that lasted for generations.
Yeah.
So yes, if you're compromising, compromise, but then just go in with the Nephi attitude
Yeah,
to keep your part of the contract and not the lame the numbing
Yeah,
part of it.
exactly.
Because they did it, they just did it with a bad
See,
attitude.
Nephi is one of my heroes, especially when he's tied up there on the ship and he's bound and he says, I will not complain against the Lord my God. He's not going to do it. I mean, if he had a right, he could have a right to complain maybe, but he chose not to complain. And think about President Nelson's last talk and conference about being peacemakers and what the influence of negativism is in our society today and how he wants to get rid of it. I thought that was very reinforcing for one of my earlier presentations on criticism and trying to, reduce that out of our lives as much as possible because it seems to fit with that same pattern. Well, thank you all very much for tonight. We'll end on that note. So we'll have a closing prayer and that is going to be offered by, we got the microphone? Yes, there we go.
I thought you were saying, can you leave the prayer?
Yeah.
No, but I will remember next time.
Our kind of, Father, and we are grateful this time. We have you be together to learn, to grow. We're grateful.
Another key, by the way, for example, is that there's a difference between asking open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions, you can't answer with a yes or a no. So how many fingers you have in your hand? You talk to a boy. How many fingers you have in your hand? 10. That's the end of the conversation because you answered the question. How do you feel about the fingers on your hand? You can't answer that question with a yes or a no. So open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions can be helpful if you're trying to develop a conversation. And so if in some ways, the more open-ended questions you can ask ladies and girls, and I think you'll find that their response gives them more of an opportunity, a broader range of reaction time. Open-ended versus closed-ended questions. Okay? All right. Arise and walk, leave and sin no more. All right.